My parents gave my sister keys to my sold house. Guess who walked in? Growing up, I always knew where I stood in my family, and it wasn't at the top. My younger sister, Amanda, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. When she joined the swim team in middle school, my parents threw her a party, invited the neighbors, even bought her a cake shaped like a pool with tiny icing goggles on top. When I won a regional robotics competition that same year, my dad glanced up from the newspaper and asked if that meant I'd still have time to mow the lawn. That contrast was my life. Every triumph of mine was measured against Amanda's existence, and somehow always fell short. She got a brand new Honda Civic on her 16th birthday, wrapped in a giant bow in the driveway. On my 16th, my dad tossed me a bus schedule and told me independence meant figuring things out for myself. I laughed it off at the time, but that sting never really faded. In college, the differences became brutal. My parents paid Amanda's full tuition at a private university, rented her an off-campus apartment, and sent her a monthly allowance so she could focus on her studies. Me, they sat me down before senior year and said, "Sorry, Dexter, we just can't afford to help you. We're saving for Amanda's grad school." They even tried to make it sound like a compliment. "You're smart, you'll figure it out." And I did. I worked 3 jobs, barely slept, but graduated with honors and minimal debt. I told myself that was resilience, but inside, I wondered if they'd ever see me as more than second place. Buying my first house in Boston at 30 felt like a personal victory no one could take away. A modest 3-bedroom colonial, nothing extravagant. But it was mine. Proof that I could build a stable life without anyone's help. I'd poured years of sleepless nights, overtime paychecks, and careful saving into that down payment. When I called my parents, I hoped just once they'd sound proud. My dad's first question was about the interest rate. My mom asked if it wasn't too much house for just one person. Amanda chimed in with, "When can I come stay?" That was the closest I got to congratulations. I learned to stop expecting validation. Holidays were tolerable only because I kept conversations light. I played my part, the son who never rocked the boat, while Amanda kept the spotlight, even into adulthood. When her marriage collapsed, she moved back in with my parents, who treated her like a wounded princess. Suddenly, every conversation circled back to her pain, her needs, her fresh start. "Family helps. Family, Dexter," my mom whispered on the phone one evening, the same guilt-laced tone she'd perfected all my life. My dad was more blunt. "Can't you just loan Amanda a little money? She's had it rough." The implication was clear. Amanda's comfort was the family's collective responsibility. My achievements. Mine alone. I tried to help in ways that didn't involve writing blank checks. I updated her resume, set her up with interviews, even offered my guest room for a week, while she looked for an apartment. But when I drew the line at becoming her permanent safety net, the disappointment was palpable. Amanda texted me passive-aggressive barbs about how some people just don't understand family. That was our dynamic in a nutshell. Amanda expected doors to open for her simply because she wanted them open. My parents turned every lock and handed her the key. And me, I learned to pick myself up after every slammed door. Ask yourself what happens when a family builds one child into a shining tower and leaves the other standing in its shadow. Eventually, the one in the shadow learns to see clearly, to stop chasing approval, to start imagining an escape. That escape came in the form of an unexpected email, a job offer, a chance to move thousands of miles away, a chance to finally live life without being tethered to the role my family had written for me. But of course, Amanda wasn't going to let me go without pulling me back into her chaos. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I almost deleted it thinking it was spam. A Madrid-based tech company, Tech Fusion International, wanted to interview me for a senior developer role. They said they'd found my open source work online and were impressed with my problem-solving approach. At first I laughed. Madrid, I'd never even been to Spain. But the more I read, the more it made sense. A big salary bump, a chance to work on cutting-edge AI projects, and 2 years of guaranteed placement overseas. It felt like an open door, a door I hadn't even realized I'd been waiting for. Still, I hesitated. Because with my family, every opportunity carried a shadow. What would they say if I left? Would they brand me selfish for moving away while Amanda was recovering from her divorce? Would they say I was abandoning them, abandoning her? The guilt settled heavy in my chest before I even told them. I called my best friend Tyler, pacing the kitchen as I explained the offer. "Are you seriously considering turning this down?" he asked. "It's complicated," I muttered, though even to me it sounded weak. "No, it's not." Tyler shot back. "Dex, this is the family that paid Amanda's tuition while you worked 3 jobs. The family that gave her a new car while you got bus schedules. If you pass this up because of them, you're making the same mistake again." His words stung because they were true. For the next week, I buried myself in research. Cost of living in Madrid, expat communities, cultural differences. I even started Spanish lessons online. Every step made the possibility feel less like a fantasy and more like a plan. When the official offer letter landed in my inbox, I didn't hesitate. I accepted within 24 hours. Telling my family, though, was another matter. I picked a Sunday afternoon hoping church would put them in good spirits. "I've accepted a new job," I began cautiously, "in Madrid. I'll be moving in 6 weeks." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then my mother, "Madrid, Spain. Why on earth would you leave Boston? Everything you need is here." My father jumped in, practical, as always. "What about your house? You can't just abandon property like that. It's irresponsible." "I'm selling it," I said firmly. That's when my mother's tone shifted that sweet, sour edge she used before making unreasonable requests. Well, this could work perfectly. Amanda still hasn't found affordable housing. She could house sit for you. It would help both of you. There it was, the golden child card. No, I said, surprising even myself with how steady my voice sounded. Amanda can't stay in my house. I've already made my decision. My father bristled. Why pay strangers when family could help? She'd take good care of it. I nearly laughed. Amanda, who once called me crying because she didn't know how to reset a circuit breaker, was going to manage a whole house. I'm either selling it or renting through a management company. That's final. The conversation unraveled after that. They accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, abandoning Amanda in her time of need. Amanda herself called later, her voice dripping with entitlement. It's perfect, Dex. Why wouldn't you let me stay? You're going to be gone anyway. I cut her off. Because it's my house and my decision. End of story. It was the first time I'd drawn a line so clearly. And it felt terrifying, but also liberating. Within 2 weeks, the house sold. A young couple bought it, first-time homeowners who looked thrilled just to have a place of their own. Watching them hold the keys made me realize I wasn't just giving up a house. I was closing a chapter. As the moving boxes stacked higher and the flight date loomed, I felt lighter. For once, my life wasn't being dictated by guilt or obligation. Madrid wasn't just a career move, it was a chance to breathe. But if I thought distance alone would free me from Amanda's shadow, I was wrong. Because 2 weeks later, my phone lit up with her name and her voice was full of panic. I was settling into Madrid life when the call came. It was nearly midnight in Boston, but Amanda's name flashed across my screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was frantic. Dexter, why didn't you tell me you sold the house? My fork froze halfway to my mouth. What are you talking about? I'm standing in your living room with the new owners and they're threatening to call the police. The wine I'd been sipping nearly came back up. You're what, Amanda? That's not my house anymore. Mom and Dad gave me your spare keys, she snapped. They said I could move in. I've already put some of my stuff in the guest bedroom. For a moment, I couldn't even form words. The Coopers? My buyers were probably staring at her like she was insane, and I couldn't blame them. I forced myself to stay calm. Amanda put me on speaker. I need to talk to them. There was shuffling, then a man's voice. This is Ryan Cooper. My wife and I bought this house 2 weeks ago. We came home from dinner to find a stranger inside, claiming she had permission to stay. My stomach twisted. Mr. Cooper, I'm so sorry. I'm Dexter Reynolds, the previous owner. I had no idea my sister would do this. Please understand, she had no right to be there. His wife cut in, sharp and angry. She's moved furniture, rearranged the living room, like she owns the place. In the background, Amanda whined. I thought it was fine. Mom and Dad said it would be fine. The humiliation burned. I promised the Coopers I'd cover damages and begged them not to involve the police. Then I switched to my parents' number. Dexter James Reynolds. My father barked full name mode. Why didn't you tell us you sold the house? I told you I handled the housing situation. I said, my voice shaking with fury. Why did you give Amanda my keys without asking me? We assumed you'd want to help your sister, Mom said smoothly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You assumed wrong. That house belongs to someone else now. Amanda could be arrested for trespassing. You need to fix this. Dad shot back. Buy the house back if you have to. Your sister needs somewhere to live. The audacity left me speechless for a beat. Buy the house back? As if it were a jacket I could return to the rack. When I found my voice, it was cold. I'm not buying the house back. Amanda needs to leave tonight. I'll pay for a hotel, but she's leaving. I clicked back to the Cooper's line. Mr. Cooper, I've arranged a hotel for my sister. Please put me on speaker again. Amanda, I said firmly, you need to apologize to these people and leave their home right now. I've paid for a hotel room downtown. You'll stay there until you find your own apartment. Her voice cracked. How could you do this to me? I've already moved my things in. Where am I supposed to go? To the hotel, I said. Or the police station. Your choice. There was a long pause, then Mrs. Cooper's voice. She's agreed to leave. We'll help her load her car. Relief rushed through me. Thank you. Again, I'm deeply sorry. When the call ended, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. I hope you're happy. Mom and Dad are furious with you. I have nowhere to live because of you. I stared at the message, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. Because of me? No. Because of her choices and their enabling. That night, I lay awake in Madrid staring at the ceiling. I thought I'd put an ocean between myself and my family's dysfunction. But somehow it had followed me. Amanda had walked into a stranger's home with my keys carrying my name like a weapon. And Mom and Dad acted like I was the one who needed to fix it. For the first time, I saw the dynamic for what it was. This wasn't about family helping family. This was about control. They expected me to bend, to cave, to sacrifice because I always had. But something inside me had shifted. For once, I wasn't the scared kid desperate for their approval. I was a grown man with a new life, a new country, and my own rules. And this time, I wasn't going to play along. The next morning, my phone lit up with missed calls, 7 from my parents, 5 from Amanda. There were also texts from my aunt and uncle, clearly fed a one-sided version of the drama. I ignored them all until afternoon. Then I decided no more dodging. It was time to face the storm. I hit video call. As expected, Amanda sat between my parents on their living room couch, eyes red and swollen. Dad's jaw was clenched. Mom's arms crossed tight across her chest. Dexter James Reynolds. Dad began, his voice like a gavel. You have some explaining to do. Actually, I said, surprising, even myself. You three are the ones who need to explain. Why did you hand over keys to a house that wasn't mine anymore? You never told us you sold it, Mom snapped. How were we supposed to know? I told you I had handled the housing situation. I shot back. That should have been enough. I don't owe you the details of every private transaction in my life. Dad's voice rose. Your sister needed help during a difficult time, and you couldn't even keep your house open for her. What kind of brother are you? I clenched my fist just out of frame. I offered Amanda other help, updating her resume, connecting her to jobs, even letting her stay temporarily while she searched for her own place. What I didn't offer was free reign of a property I no longer owned. Amanda broke in her voice, trembling with practiced fragility. It wouldn't have been forever, Dexter, just until I got back on my feet. I stared at her through the screen. Amanda, you've been getting back on your feet for almost a year now. At what point do you start walking on your own? Her lip trembled. That's unfair. No, I said sharply. What's unfair is you assuming my sacrifices are automatic. What's unfair is Mom and Dad treating my achievements like chores while treating yours like miracles. Mom gasped. How dare you throw the past in our faces? Amanda's been through trauma, her divorce, which somehow makes her entitled to my house, I interrupted. A house I worked 3 jobs to afford. A house I paid for without a dime of help. Dad's face darkened. We're your family. Family helps family. Funny, I said, my voice cold. That rule never seemed to apply to me. Not when I needed tuition help. Not when I worked nights stocking shelves just to survive college. But the second Amanda needs something, suddenly family is sacred. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Amanda sniffled loudly, then whispered, I gave notice at my apartment because Mom and Dad promised me I could stay at your place. Now I have nowhere to go. My jaw dropped. You ended your lease based on their word, not mine. Did it even occur to you to ask me? They said it would be fine, she muttered, shooting a desperate glance at our parents. I turned my glare on them. You told her she could move into my house without asking me? It made no sense to sell it, Dad said defensively. Why not keep a perfectly good house for a temporary job overseas? This isn't temporary, I snapped. It's a career move, possibly permanent. And even if it were temporary, it was still my decision, not yours. Mom's eyes hardened. Well, now Amanda has nowhere to live because of your impulsive choice. My choice was anything but impulsive. I planned it carefully. Amanda, like every other adult, has options. Apartments, roommates, even moving back in with you two. My house was never her safety net. Dad leaned forward. Then you need to fix this. Talk to the buyers. Offer to buy it back. You're making good money, aren't you? I almost laughed at the absurdity. You expect me to uproot a young family who just bought their first home because you made promises you had no right to make. If you really cared about family, yes, he shot back. I shook my head slowly. What I care about is honesty and boundaries. And right now, all I see is manipulation. Amanda's tears turned to anger. You've always been selfish, Dexter. Always. Now you're abandoning your own sister. I'm not abandoning you, I said firmly. I pay for a hotel. I offered help in finding jobs, but I won't destroy my own life to cushion yours. That's not selfishness, it's survival. Dad's voice dropped low and dangerous. If this is how you treat family, maybe we need to reconsider whether you're really part of this family at all. In the past, those words would have shattered me. I'd have bent, apologized, begged to be accepted. But now, staring at their angry faces from my apartment in Madrid, I felt something different, clarity. If that's how you feel, I said evenly, I respect your choice, but I'm not changing mine. Mom looked stunned as though the script had flipped. Amanda froze mid-sob, realizing her tactics weren't working. Dad's finger hovered over the end call button. When you remember what family means, he said coldly, you can call us. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time, waiting for the familiar wave of guilt and panic. But it never came. Instead, I felt an odd calm. For the first time, their disapproval had no weight. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan Cooper, the buyer. Your sister has taken her things. No damage. We know this wasn't your fault. Relief washed over me. A stranger showed more grace than my own blood. I leaned back, staring at the Madrid skyline beyond my window. Maybe the distance wasn't just miles. It was a new life, one where I finally chose myself. The 3 days after that video call were eerily quiet. No texts, no missed calls, no drama bleeding across the ocean. For someone who had lived under the constant hum of family tension, the silence felt almost unnatural. I filled the space with Madrid. Mornings started with café con leche at the little cafe on the corner where the barista had begun greeting me like an old friend. Afternoons were for work where my team treated me with a respect I had rarely felt back home. Evenings I spent wandering through the city's twisting streets, losing myself in neighborhoods that smelled of fresh bread and orange blossoms. But even as I enjoyed the calm, I knew it wouldn't last. My family had never been the type to let conflict rest. They thrived on it, needed it like oxygen. And sure enough, on the 4th morning, an email arrived from Amanda. The subject line was stark, I'm sorry. I hesitated before opening it. My chest tightened, bracing for another wave of guilt wrapped in apology. Instead, I found something I didn't expect, a note of accountability. Dexter, it began. I've had time to think. While I still wish you told us you sold the house, I shouldn't have assumed I could move in without asking you directly. Mom and Dad encouraged me, but that doesn't excuse it. I'm sorry for putting you in that position. I didn't realize how unfair it was until now. I read those lines twice, hardly believing they came from Amanda. For years, she had been the golden child who could do no wrong. This was the first crack in the armor I'd ever seen. She went on to say she'd found a small apartment she could afford with her part-time job and a bit of savings from her divorce settlement. Our parents were helping with the deposit. She admitted it wasn't ideal, but it was hers. I hope you won't abandon the family because of this misunderstanding, she wrote. I'd like to try again if you're willing. For a long while, I just stared at the email. It wasn't perfect. She still minimized the chaos she had caused. But buried inside was something I'd been waiting to hear my whole life of recognition that my boundaries mattered. I replied simply, I'm glad you found a place. I'm not abandoning anyone. I just need healthier boundaries. I hope we can build a better relationship moving forward. Her response came within the hour. Maybe I didn't realize how different our childhoods really were. Maybe we should talk about it sometime. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was a start. My parents were slower to move. A week later, my mother finally texted. The message carried her signature blend of olive branch and knife twist. We miss hearing from you. Hope your job is going well. Amanda has found an apartment no thanks to your help, but she's managing. Call when you can. I almost left. Even her attempt at reconciliation came packaged with blame. Still, I chose to focus on the softer parts. I texted back that I was happy for Amanda and that work was going well. I sent photos of the Prado Museum, the Plaza Mayor, and the park near my new apartment. A subtle way of saying, this is my life now. 2 days later, my father called. His voice was gruff, cautious. The conversation was stilted, weather, baseball scores, surface-level talk. But before hanging up, he cleared his throat, that familiar prelude to something heavier. Your mother and I may have overreacted, he said, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. We should have asked before telling Amanda she could stay at your house. Coming from him, that was as close to an apology as I'd ever get. I let the silence stretch, then said evenly, I appreciate that. I hope we can move forward with better communication. He grunted, then asked about my job. For the first time, I felt a shift, small but real. In the weeks that followed, life in Madrid bloomed. I signed a lease on an apartment near Retiro Park, with tall windows and a little balcony perfect for morning coffee. My team invited me into their circle of friends' weekend hikes in the mountains dinners that stretched late into the night, laughter that needed no translation. Amanda and I began tentative video calls. She admitted she was working full-time, now her first real job in years. She even mentioned therapy, almost sheepishly, as if she knew I'd approve. I'm trying, she said one evening, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. For once, I want to build something on my own. Something inside me softened. Maybe she really was learning. Maybe I wasn't the only one breaking old patterns. One evening, after a long day, I sat on my balcony as the city glowed pink and gold in the fading sun. My phone buzzed with a message from Ryan Cooper, the man who'd bought my house. He'd attached photos of the kitchen renovation, the bright new tiles gleaming. Just thought you'd want to see how it's coming along. Thanks again for resolving everything with your sister so quickly. We really appreciate it. I stared at the photos, then smiled. The house that once symbolized independence for me was now the beginning of someone else's story, and that felt right. For the first time, I wasn't clinging to the past or chasing approval I'd never receive. I was building something new. And the silence from my family, it no longer terrified me. It gave me room to breathe. By the time autumn colored Madrid's trees in shades of rust and gold, I felt more settled than I ever had in Boston. My apartment in Retiro had become home shelves lined with books in both English and Spanish, a balcony filled with potted plants I struggled to keep alive, and a kitchen that smelled of olive oil and garlic more often than not. What surprised me most wasn't how quickly I adapted it, was how naturally joy seeped in once the constant weight of family expectation was gone. On Fridays, my team at Tech Fusion insisted on long lunches that stretched past 2 hours. Javier always argued passionately that Malasaña was the best neighborhood, while Sofia countered with Salamanca, and Elena reminded everyone that Retiro, my choice, was clearly superior. We laughed until our stomachs hurt and no one rushed back to work. These weren't just colleagues anymore. They were friends, and in a quiet way, they were becoming my chosen family. One Sunday, Miguel invited me to his parents' house outside the city. His mother kissed both my cheeks, loaded my plate with more food than I could possibly eat, and asked questions about my life with a warmth my own parents rarely showed. As I sat at their table, surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses, I realized how foreign, but also how healing unconditional welcome felt. Back in Boston, Amanda's updates trickled in. She sent photos of her new apartment, small but cozy, decorated with secondhand furniture she proudly called vintage. She sounded lighter during our calls, less defensive. Once she even joked, I'm finally learning how to be a grown-up. Took me long enough. It wasn't perfect. She still slipped into old habits, fishing for sympathy when things went wrong. But I noticed something I'd never seen before effort. She had taken a full-time administrative job at a community college and mentioned almost shyly that she'd started therapy. I guess it's time to figure out why I keep depending on everyone else, she admitted. That confession alone felt like progress. My parents, though, were slower to adjust. Mom's texts came sprinkled with guilt trips. Amanda's working so hard, don't you think you could send her some extra money? But I answered with firm politeness, never taking the bait. Dad stayed mostly silent, his calls short and perfunctory. Until one evening, he surprised me. I was sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, the city humming below, when his name flashed on my phone. I answered, bracing myself. Dexter, he said after a long pause. Your mother and I were thinking of visiting. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. My parents had never shown the slightest interest in my life abroad, let alone hinted at travel. You want to come to Madrid, I asked? Buying time. Yes, he replied, his voice oddly cautious. We thought maybe it's time we saw this life you've built. Try to understand better. The words stunned me, not because they erased years of tension, but because they carried a tone I'd never heard from him before: uncertainty, almost humility. I agreed. Madrid is beautiful in the fall. I think you'd like it. And so, weeks later, I found myself waiting at Barajas Airport, watching streams of passengers spill from arrivals. When I spotted them, Mom clutching her handbag like a shield, Dad scanning the crowd with military precision, my stomach twisted. The visit was a mix of old patterns and tentative new ground. Mom criticized almost everything at first: the size of my apartment, the strangeness of Spanish meals, the late dinners. But then she tasted the tortilla at my neighborhood cafe and asked the owner's daughter for the recipe. She grumbled about the metro until a kind stranger gave up a seat for her, and suddenly she couldn't stop praising how polite Spaniards are. Dad was quieter, but one evening, while sipping wine on my balcony, he surprised me again. You seem settled here, he said slowly. More so than you ever did back home. I admitted. He nodded, staring into the darkening skyline. We didn't always make it easy for you, Dexter. We had expectations. Maybe we didn't see you clearly through them. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest I'd ever heard him come. And in that moment, it was enough. When they left after 4 days, our goodbyes were warmer than I'd expected. Mom even kissed my cheek, whispering, "Thank you for showing us." As their plane lifted off, I felt lighter. The visit hadn't erased the past, but it had shifted something. For the first time, I believed change, slow, imperfect change, was possible. Back in Retiro, I threw myself into my work. Tech Fusion promoted me to lead a new AI ethics initiative, a role that blended technical challenge with questions that mattered deeply to me. My Spanish improved, clumsy sentences turning into conversations with neighbors who waved when they saw me on the street. Life here wasn't just survival, it was growth. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting to my family's needs or demands. I was building something of my own. By winter, Madrid no longer felt foreign. The rhythm of late dinners, long lunches, and Sunday strolls through Retiro Park had become second nature. I knew which cafe made the strongest cortado, which market sold the freshest olives, and which streets to avoid if I didn't want to be swept up in tourist crowds. What I hadn't expected was how quickly my old sense of anxiety about family started to fade. For most of my life, I carried a constant hum of worry, like background noise. I couldn't switch off. Am I disappointing them? Am I being selfish? Should I do more? Now that hum was quieting. Amanda surprised me most of all. She sent me a message one Friday evening with a photo attached a simple office cubicle decorated with a plant and a mug that read "Boss Lady." First real full-time job in years, her text read. Not glamorous, but it feels good. I stared at the photo for a long time. This was the sister who once mocked me for working 3 jobs in college, who had relied on our parents for everything from rent to car payments. And now here she was proud of something she'd earned on her own. When we video chatted that weekend, she looked different. Tired, yes, but there was a steadiness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. I'm seeing a therapist, she admitted. She's helping me understand why I depended so much on other people. Why I thought, I don't know, that the world owed me something. That's a huge step, I told her, and I meant it. Amanda laughed, a little self-conscious. Don't give me too much credit. Half the time, I just cry in her office. But I'm starting to realize maybe I wasn't the golden child after all. Maybe I was just kept small. Her words landed heavy. For years, I had envied her the car at 16, the tuition fully paid, the endless praise. But hearing her frame it as a cage rather than a crown made me rethink everything. Meanwhile, my parents' communication softened. Mom still couldn't resist jabs. Amanda's rent is so high, maybe you could chip in. But she didn't press when I ignored them. Dad, on the other hand, began calling more often, sometimes just to talk about baseball scores or the weather in Boston. His tone was different, less commanding, more curious. One night, after a long call about work and Madrid life, he hesitated before hanging up. Dexter, you've done well for yourself. I don't say that often enough. The line was quiet for a beat. My chest tightened. Thanks, Dad, I said softly. That means a lot. It wasn't everything I'd wanted growing up, but it was something. At Tech Fusion, my responsibilities grew. Leading the AI ethics initiative challenged me in ways I hadn't anticipated, not just technically, but morally. Balancing innovation with responsibility meant asking hard questions, sometimes ones without clear answers. Yet I relished the work. For once, I wasn't just producing results for someone else's approval. I was shaping something meaningful. Outside of work, friendships deepened. Miguel's parents treated me like an adopted son. Elena invited me into her family's holiday traditions, and Javier dragged me into heated debates about Spanish politics over beers that lasted until dawn. These people weren't bound to me by blood, but their acceptance felt more genuine than anything I had grown up with. Sometimes, I caught myself comparing, wondering how my life might have been if my own parents had celebrated my achievements the way my Madrid circle did. But then I reminded myself, chosen family is no less real than the one you're born into. In many ways, it's stronger because it's built on mutual respect, not obligation. Back in Boston, Amanda continued to surprise me. She called one evening giddy to tell me she'd been accepted into a paralegal certification program. It's 2 years, she said. Hard work, but I think I want to do it. I want to build something of my own. I couldn't help but smile. I'm proud of you, Amanda. She grew quiet, then whispered, I had a good example, even if I didn't appreciate it at the time. Her words lingered with me long after the call ended. Still, progress wasn't linear. My parents slipped into old patterns often. During one call, Mom complained that Amanda's therapist was filling her head with nonsense and that I was encouraging her selfish independence. I pushed back gently but firmly. Mom therapy isn't nonsense. It's helping her take responsibility. Isn't that what you always wanted? She didn't answer. For once, she seemed to have no retort. That silence, small as it was, felt like a victory. As the year drew to a close, I looked around my retiro apartment. Art on the walls, books stacked in corners, laughter from the neighbor's dinner drifting through the windows, and realized something profound for the first time in my adult life. I wasn't living in reaction to my family. I was simply living. Madrid had given me distance, but more than that, it had given me perspective. I wasn't the neglected son anymore, nor the perpetual underdog. I was a man with his own choices, his own voice, and finally his own life. September arrived with golden sunlight spilling over Madrid's rooftops, and with it something I never thought I'd see: my parents stepping off a plane in Spain. They looked out of place from the start. Dad tugged his blazer tighter despite the warm air, and Mom wrinkled her nose at the crowded terminal. Yet when they spotted me, Mom's face softened, and Dad lifted a hand in a wave. For a brief second, I felt 12 years old again, waiting for them to notice me after a school play. I braced for criticism, but instead Mom said, "It's different here," as though she were admitting something without quite knowing how. Over the next 4 days, Madrid became a mirror for our family dynamic. The first evening, I took them to a small tapas bar near Retiro. Mom poked suspiciously at the octopus dish, whispering, "Why can't they just serve chicken?" But then she tried the tortilla española and actually smiled. Dad, usually impatient, lingered over Rioja wine, asking the waiter questions in broken Spanish that made the whole table laugh. Small cracks in their armor. Day 2, I walked them through Retiro Park. Children rode boats across the lake, and street performers played violins under arched walkways. For once, Dad wasn't rushing. He stopped to watch a magician performing tricks for kids, hands in his pockets, eyes soft. "Reminds me of when you were little," he murmured, always trying to figure out how things worked. It wasn't much, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd had in years. That night, on my balcony, we opened a bottle of wine. The city hummed below neon signs, flickering neighbors laughing over late dinners. Dad cleared his throat, the same gesture he always made before saying something uncomfortable. "You seem settled here," he said finally. I am," I admitted. He hesitated, then added, "More so than you ever did back home." Mom shifted in her chair, bristling, but Dad pressed on. "We didn't always make things easy for you. We had certain expectations. When you and Amanda responded differently, we favored the one we understood better." I blinked, stunned. It wasn't a full apology, but for my father, it was monumental. "I know," I said quietly. And I carried that for a long time. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of cicadas. Then Mom spoke, her voice unsteady. "We thought we were protecting Amanda. Maybe we were protecting her too much." Hearing her admit that even vaguely loosened something tight in my chest. For years, I'd begged silently for them to see me. Now, for the first time, it felt like they actually did. Our last evening together, I took them to a family-run restaurant tucked down a narrow street. The owner's daughter, who spoke some English, translated recipes for Mom. To my surprise, Mom asked for details, even scribbling notes on a napkin. Later, she admitted, "Maybe there's more to this place than I thought." When they left the next morning, our goodbyes held a warmth I hadn't expected. Dad hugged me tightly, whispering, "Keep doing what you're doing." Mom kissed my cheeks softer than she had in years. After they flew home, Amanda called. "So how did it go?" "Better than I thought," I told her. She nodded, her expression calmer than I remembered. "They're changing." "A little. Don't push them too hard. Old habits die slow." Her maturity caught me off guard. This was the same sister who once demanded my house keys. Now she sounded like an ally. Later that night, I sat on my balcony watching Madrid's lights flicker. The thought struck me all of this, the visit, the softened words, the cracks in old walls, had started because of one messy incident with the house key. The chaos had forced us all to confront truths we'd avoided for decades. For once, I didn't feel like a child begging for scraps of approval. I felt like an adult standing eye to eye with my parents, with Amanda, with myself. It wasn't closure, not completely, but it was a beginning. And sometimes beginnings are more powerful than endings. Madrid didn't wait for me to process family drama. The city kept moving, spilling light into cobblestone streets and echoing with conversations late into the night. And somewhere between the chaos of work deadlines and weekend hikes, I realized I had built something I never thought possible, a family that wasn't bound by blood. It started small. Javier invited me to a Sunday hike in the Sierra de Guadarrama Mountains. The air was crisp, the path steep, and my legs burned within minutes, but I kept up. At the summit, as we unpacked sandwiches and shared water bottles, I looked around the circle of faces, Javier, Miguel, Sofia, and a few of their friends, and felt an unexpected warmth. No comparisons, no judgment, just people who wanted me there. Sofia's boyfriend, Mateo, slapped me on the back. "You're one of us now," he said, with a grin. It sounded casual, but to me, it was heavy with meaning. For years, I'd been the outsider in my own family. Here, thousands of miles away, I belonged. At work, Elena began trusting me with bigger projects. She even invited me to her home for dinner. Her kids ran circles around me, giggling when I stumbled through basic Spanish phrases. Her husband, a history teacher, poured me homemade vermouth and asked endless questions about Boston winters. By the end of the evening, the kids hugged me goodbye, as if I were an uncle. Driving home in a cab that night, I caught myself smiling at the thought. For once, family didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a choice. Meanwhile, Amanda was finding her own path. During one of our video calls, she looked almost unrecognizable hair, tied back, wearing simple clothes instead of the flashy outfits she once craved. I got a full-time job, she announced, trying to sound casual, but failing to hide her pride. Administrative assistant at the community college. I blinked. Full-time? That's amazing, Amanda. She shrugged, but her smile gave her away. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. And I like it. Plus, I'm taking a paralegal certification class in the evenings. Who knows, maybe I'll finally have a career. The old Amanda would have asked me to pay for tuition. This version was paying her own way. I'm proud of you, I told her. And I meant it. Her expression softened. I had a good example, Dex. Even if I didn't always treat you that way. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It felt like we were rewriting the script of our relationship, replacing rivalry with something closer to respect. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, would it last? Or was this just another temporary chapter in her ongoing drama? While Amanda wrestled with independence, my parents hovered at the edges of our new dynamic. They called more often, though. The conversations were tentative, like testing thin ice. My father asked about my projects at work, something he'd never done before. My mother sent me recipes she'd tried at home, claiming Madrid had inspired her. The old patterns weren't gone, but they were shifting. One evening, sitting with Sophia and Mateo at a small plaza, I confessed it feels strange. Like I'm more myself here than I ever was back home. But part of me keeps waiting for it to collapse. Sophia stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Maybe it's not about collapse. Maybe it's about growth. Things don't break, Dexter. They stretch. You stretched away from your family, and now everyone is adjusting. Mateo nodded. Blood family teaches you where you come from. Chosen family teaches you who you want to be. The words stayed with me. As autumn settled in, I furnished my apartment with local art and secondhand finds. Each piece told a story. A ceramic vase from a street market. A vintage lamp from a shop tucked in a side alley. My home reflected me, not my parents' expectations, not Amanda's comparisons, just me. One Sunday, I hosted brunch. Javier brought pastries, Sophia brought fruit, and Elena arrived with her kids in tow. My living room buzzed with Spanish, English, and laughter. At one point, Miguel raised his glass and said, "To Dexter, who came from far away but fits right here." The toast caught me off guard. My throat tightened, and I had to look away. For years, I'd craved that kind of acknowledgement from my own family. Now here it was, freely given by people who owed me nothing. That night, as the last guest left and I washed dishes in the quiet apartment, I realized something important. I no longer needed my family's constant validation. I wanted peace with them, yes. But my sense of worth came from within and from the community I had chosen. The truth is, blood doesn't always define family. Sometimes, the ones who choose to stand beside you are the ones who matter most. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval. I was living it. It had been months since I'd left Boston behind. My apartment in Retiro felt like home. My Spanish had improved enough that I could argue with taxi drivers, and my weekends were filled with laughter and exploration instead of dread over family obligations. Then one evening, an email arrived with the subject line, "Thought you'd like to see this." It was from Ryan Cooper, the man whose living room Amanda had once invaded with boxes and excuses. I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself for complaints or an invoice for damages. Instead, what I found nearly brought me to tears. Attached were photos of the house I'd worked so hard to buy, the same one I'd sold before flying to Madrid. The Coopers had transformed it. The outdated kitchen, which I'd always dreamed of renovating, now gleamed with white tile, modern fixtures, and warm wood cabinets. The backyard, once a patch of struggling grass, had been landscaped into a vibrant garden, with a swing set for their young daughter. Beneath the photos, Jessica Cooper had written, "We wanted you to see how your old house has become our home. Every space now holds new memories. Thank you again for handling that awkward situation with your sister so quickly. We know it couldn't have been easy. You're welcome to visit us for dinner anytime you're back in Boston." I stared at the screen for a long time. For years, that house had been my symbol of independence, the proof that I could build a life on my own terms despite everything. Letting it go had been terrifying. But here was evidence that it hadn't just ended, it had transformed. It was no longer my burden or battleground. It was someone else's joy. And somehow that made me feel lighter. I wrote back, "Thank you for sharing this. The renovations look incredible. I'm so glad the house is bringing you happiness. If I'm ever back in Boston, I'd be honored to stop by." Hitting send, I realized something important. I wasn't haunted by the house anymore. The bitterness of Amanda's intrusion, the guilt for my parents' disappointment, the endless tug of war, it was all fading. What remained was gratitude. The house had given me stability when I needed it. Now it gave another family the same gift. That night, I poured myself a glass of Spanish wine and sat on my balcony. Below, the city hummed with life. Somewhere far away, Amanda was building her own fragile independence. My parents were adjusting to boundaries they never thought I'd enforce. and the Coopers were laughing in the kitchen I had once cooked in. Life had gone on for all of us. The next day, I video called Amanda. To my surprise, she seemed calmer. I saw your email, she said before I could bring it up. Mom showed me the pictures. The house looks amazing. Her tone wasn't bitter, just reflective. I guess it really wasn't mine to take. The admission floored me. For Amanda to acknowledge that without drama, without a fight, felt like progress. It wasn't about taking, I said gently. It was about assumptions. But I think we've all learned something. Amanda nodded, then smirked. Yeah, like don't move your stuff into a stranger's living room without checking first. We both laughed at the first real laugh we'd shared in years. Later that week, my parents called too. My father cleared his throat, a telltale sign he was about to say something difficult. Your mother and I may have been wrong. He admitted each word, dragged out like it weighed a ton. We shouldn't have given Amanda your keys without asking. And we definitely shouldn't have assumed you'd keep the house. Coming from him, that was monumental. My mother, in her own way, added, the Coopers' renovations are lovely. Maybe we'll finally stop calling it your house. It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. As we spoke, I realized how different this call felt compared to the battles months earlier. They weren't demanding guilt-tripping or threatening estrangement. They were trying, however clumsily, to respect me. And that small shift meant everything. Later, over dinner with Sophia and Mateo, I told them about the Coopers' email. Sophia smiled knowingly. See, sometimes letting go isn't loss. It's opening space for something new. Mateo raised his glass. To new families, new homes, and new selves. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel torn between who I was and who my family wanted me to be. The Coopers' photos were more than renovations. They were proof that endings could also be beginnings. Proof that I could step out of the shadow of family drama and into a life I had chosen. And as I sat there, among friends who had become my chosen family, I realized that sometimes closure doesn't come with a dramatic showdown or a final speech. Sometimes it arrives quietly in an email full of kitchen photos reminding you that moving forward is not only possible, but necessary. Thanks for watching. All the way, your likes, comments, and subscribes help me keep sharing more full story moments.